In this video, we will cover the topic of disclosing your disability to help you decide if, when, and how to share your disability with an employer. Disclosure means informing someone or to make the information known, in this case to your employer or your college, about your disability, specific learning difficulty, or mental health difficulty. Ultimately, disclosure is one of the most complex aspects of having a disability, especially in relation to employment. This can be a challenging decision for many people with disabilities and will often be made by weighing up the benefits of disclosing, such as receiving reasonable accommodations and raising awareness, against the cost of potential discrimination, the fear of being treated differently, or being labelled. To support you in considering whether or not to share information about your disability, AHEAD has put together a disclosure guide. Here, we guide you through some background information on disclosure, information on the law, and our suggested approach to disclosure with some examples and information about reasonable accommodations. You can find this on our website at ahead.ie/disclosure. For those of you thinking about how or if and when to disclose, keep in mind that it is a personal choice and should be well considered. It is helpful to look at some of the factors that sometimes enable or discourage people to disclose. These include personal factors, environmental factors, and systemic factors. Personal factors could include the type of disability you have, how you identify, as some people do not identify as being disabled, your personality, and your past experiences with disclosing. The environmental factors are things that are outside of your control in the workplace environment. This could include the culture the company has created and if they foster an inclusive and supportive working environment, and the awareness or education of disability in the workplace. Finally, we have systemic factors which are very much outside of your control. This covers things like employment equality legislation, the company policy and procedures, and the supports and grants that are available. To support you in making this decision, we have outlined an action plan covering 5 questions: the why, what, when, who, and how. This is all in our Guide to Disclosure, which is an editable PDF that you can work with online, or you can print it out and work through each section yourself. We start off with the why, identifying the reasons you may want to disclose. This could be that you require a piece of assistive technology to better support you with your role, or an accessible building if you are a wheelchair user. Depending on your why, this will shape what you decide to disclose. If you ask for a reasonable accommodation, you will need to give some background and explain. Give relevant, useful information specific to your disability and the accommodation that you are requesting. This should then give you an idea of when is the right time for you to share information about your disability and accommodations you may need. Depending on your situation, you may want to disclose before you even interview. Depending on your why, what, and when, this may help you decide who is the most appropriate person to disclose to. If you're looking for a reasonable accommodation, it's important to disclose to those who can help to put these in place. This could be the person arranging the interviews, your line manager, or an access or disability officer. You then decide how you wish to disclose, depending on what you are most comfortable with. This could be via email to your line manager, or you may prefer to discuss it on a call or in person. This is the action plan template in our disclosure guide, where you can work through all the questions we just discussed in line with your own experience. With all of that in mind, it is useful for you to be aware of certain key pieces of legislation relating to disability and employment. The Employment Equality Act is a key piece of legislation that relates to disability in the workplace, which employers must abide by. It promotes equality and prohibits discrimination across 9 grounds, one of which is disability. The employer also has an obligation to provide reasonable accommodations to ensure equal treatment, whether that's in the interview process or if you disclose once you are employed. You can read more about the relevant legislation and the organisations that can assist you with more information on your rights in our disclosure guide. In line with the Employment Equality Act, an employer is obliged to take appropriate measures, known as reasonable accommodations, to enable a person who has a disability to have access to employment, to participate or advance in employment, or to undertake training. It is important to note at this stage that there is no legal obligation on an employee or a potential employee to disclose that they have a disability. This is entirely a personal choice. It is important, however, to keep in mind that there is a specific obligation on an employee under health and safety law to disclose if their disability or condition could expose them or another person to danger or risks of danger. You will also need to consider that if the employer has no knowledge or awareness of your disability, they cannot provide you with any reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations are effective and practical measures that the employer takes to enable people with disabilities to participate in employment, such as the adaptation of premises and equipment, patterns of working time, distribution of tasks, and the provision of training or integration resources. There is no comprehensive list of reasonable accommodations, as every disabled person is different and every job is different. Accommodations might include having captions enabled for a virtual interview, extra time for online assessments or work tasks, or time off for medical appointments. In closing, disclosure is a personal decision and depends entirely on your own situation. It is important to know your rights and understand potential reasonable accommodations that might support you in your role. Resources like the AHEAD Disclosure Guide offer essential support, and with careful planning, disclosure can be a very positive step. If you have any queries about disclosure, please reach out to getahead@ahead.ie or visit ahead.ie/disclosure for more information.